It's actually literally what it's called, Tony's Magic Mix. This is an organic fertilizer that's patented by this guy named Tony, who lives in Tucson, which is our neighboring city about an hour and a half away. This stuff is so good that he ends up on an entire route monthly dropping this off to various home gardeners around the valley. He also works with some farmers and some wholesalers. I was turned on to Tony about a year ago when I started this project, and I reached out to our vast local community asking about tips on growing fruit trees, and multiple people referenced him and what he's doing. Now, I don't know, you can go back into our feed. There's been 2 different videos about this tree. The first one was when I actually planted it, and it was planted 10 months ago, just 10 months ago, and it was about this tall. It's pretty much doubled in height, and the most exciting thing about it are these fruits that are coming in. So all of these caterpillar looking things in here are Pakistani mulberries. Right now they just came in. They need another few weeks. They're going to ripen and mature over the next month, month and a half. They're going to turn purple in color, and they end up like a really, really sweet berry. Off the tree, they're just the most delicious thing. They have a very short shelf life, so what we're going to be doing, since we have 2 of these trees, is immediately preserving them so that we can use them in the bakery. Meaning we have to make them into a jam or do something to preserve them right off the bat. Now, this tree is only a year old that it's been in the ground. You can see how much height it got. Every single one of these new mulberries is coming with a brand new branch. So there's all this new branching that's happening. So by this time next year, this tree will have expanded significantly. I've got a couple other trees in this kind of micro area. There's a grapefruit tree right here towards the edge. They're spaced about 12 feet. You can see just how prolific this grapefruit tree is. All of those little bulbs are mini grapefruit that are coming in. Not all of those will end up surviving the summer, but we will have a nice harvest for such a small grapefruit tree. These trees will end up working in symbiosis with one another. The mulberry just got all of its leaves back, so if you had been here 2 weeks ago, you would have seen a barren tree, which means in this winter month, these 2 citrus trees that are spaced about 12 feet apart will get full sun. In the summertime, this tree will eventually create a canopy over these 2 trees. It's significantly taller. I'm going to have to do some pruning because they're close together, but eventually this tree will be above those trees, providing a really nice shade for our 120-degree summers. This entire system that I'm designing here is a living system underneath. So I'm fertilizing these trees with this organic fertilizer, and this is made up of a bunch of really awesome things like guanos, and there's even some lava rock in here that helps with percolation. And so all I'm doing is putting a different amount per tree based on the size of the tree down right at the base here, and then just spreading it into the soil. And this also, whenever I put this fertilizer down every couple weeks, allows me an opportunity to come in here and clean up this part right at the base of the tree. It's important in our climate to, well, actually it's really important in every climate to make sure that there's not root rot. So you don't want the mulch coming up right on the tree. Mulch in our climate is extremely important for preserving moisture, especially as we get into the summer. And this is becoming more and more of a living system with every passing week. So just a couple days ago, I introduced a handful of red wiggler worms because we have a worm bin in the back, and it was starting to explode with worms. And so there's some composting worms working in this mulch, and I need to put more mulch down now. Eventually, all the trees in my yard will provide all the mulch I need. I'll be able to clip the tops throw them through a wood chipper, but we're years away from that. So I'm slowly converting all the rock into mulch. I'm gonna go around and add fertilizer to all of my fruit trees, which will give you an opportunity to see what I've been working on. This really is my hobby project away from the bakery. It's different than baking. Usually it's free of any distractions, and I just get to kind of observe a different form of life. So I'm gonna add some fertilizer to all the trees. It's been a couple weeks. I just got a delivery yesterday. What's nice about getting fertilizer in this way is a lot of my knowledge, a lot of the things that I'm sharing really come from some of the time that I've spent with a person like Tony, who has been growing all kinds of things, not just trees, but all kinds of plants in a nursery in Tucson for over 35 years. And it's an incredible relationship because he takes time every time that he drops off fertilizer and walks the garden with me and gives me tips. And in that way, it's like having a personal coach. It's part of, I mean, I think it's priced in because it's not inexpensive, this fertilizer, but if you see what it does, I put this stuff down and then by the next day you can see how the trees respond to it. Right now we're in the heart of kind of a growing season. Everything's waking up from winter dormancy. And so you'll notice every day new growth. So all of this is new growth, and I bet you anything by tomorrow, between the little rain that we got today and the fertilizer, you'll notice a difference just in 24 hours. Then I'll walk over this way to our property line here, where I have a row of dwarf citrus trees. Dwarf meaning they're never going to really reach more than 8 feet tall. This pine that's in front of them is planted close, but eventually it's just going to be a giant pine with a trunk at their level, and it will just be trunk up into the top of the canopies. It'll also provide some important western shade, especially in the summer months. So this is a kumquat here. I have a tangerine, a mandarin, a blood orange, all in line. And this is going to help me create a little bit of a privacy wall. My neighbor on this side is not a problem neighbor by any means. And I really want to, since we're talking about property lines and neighbors, I want to call out the fact that we actually have awesome neighbors on the whole. It only takes one. It really only takes one. We really get along with the vast majority of our neighbors, including the ones on either side of us. Where regularly we're exchanging bread. So I'm only going to put one scoop here just because it's a much smaller tree, this kumquat. This year on this property, we're going to have citrus of all variety. We'll have lemons, we'll have oranges of different varieties. We'll have limes. We're also going to get mulberries this year. My apple tree is flowering, so we'll go back there in a moment. Now, this is a little bit of a more sad story. This is my moringa tree, and it's supposed to be a big shade tree actually, but I planted it pretty late in the fall and we had a pretty cold winter. It's not dead at the root, but this entire stalk is dead. It just froze over, and so the big question mark here is whether in May I'm going to get new growth out of the root. So Tony was letting me know yesterday that I'm just going to have to remain patient and see what happens. But it was just a little bit too small when I put it in the ground. Probably should have kept it in its pot through the winter. So I'm not going to spend too much fertilizer on it. Here's a lemon tree that was planted a little bit earlier than some of the trees that you saw up front. It's been in the ground now about 1.5 years, but I didn't know Tony when I first put it in. So ever since, so it's really like on the same course as all the others. You can see a ton of new buds coming in. So we're actually going to get lemons this year, which for Amanda is really a nice blessing. Lemons are one of those staple ingredients in Lebanese cuisine, so she loves using lemons and is very excited about it. Now we're getting close to some of my most productive trees. This one's still in dormancy. It's another variety of plum. There's a giant hole in the ground where I am digging up our flood irrigation. We have flood irrigation on the property, but some previous owner decided to cement over the valve. Not really sure why, but it's a very efficient way of us being able to water all of this. Right now I'm using just drip, and it's costly to try to water this many trees. The flood irrigation method not only delivers nutrients, meaning I will have less of a dependency on fertilizer once I activate it, but the deep soaking that flood irrigation provides allows for less overall water usage, and it's one of the ways that people have been growing food in arid climates for a long time. We have the exact opposite issue as a lot of other climates, where in some places in the world you want to drain water. Here you really want to trap it. It's my apple tree, and you can see all these pink buds which indicate that I'm going to get apples this year. Another one that I put in the last year. And finally, my last couple trees here. This is my surviving date palm. You can see how tiny this one is, but it's nice and green, and it's shooting out new growth, which means it's survived its transplant. And so I expect that I'll have dates back here in a number of years. With how small this thing is, I might have to wait seven years or so for dates, but it'll be worth the wait. You saw the mulberry in the front, which is already full of fruit. This one was the same size as the other one when I put in, but it's substantially taller. So it grew more in its first year, primarily because the soil back here is better developed. We've grown more things back here. We used to have a garden bed back here. So this is very rich soil, whereas in the front, where all those rocks were, if you go back to when I planted the mulberry tree, I just took all the rocks out, and there's just not a whole lot of life in that soil. So what's interesting though is this one had so much growth last season that it was still growing while the other one had already dropped its leaves. And so now it's running behind schedule of the other one. Other one's already full of fruit, and this one only has fruit in the very bottom so far. Its new leaves are tiny, and these are still old leaves from last season that haven't quite finished falling off. What's interesting about all this is, as these leaves fall off, people are tempted to clean them up, but the reason that I'm creating mulch systems is so that all these leaves can kind of get worked into the soil and provide the nutrients that the soil needs for this tree. So the best nutrient source for a tree is that tree's own source nutrients, meaning the decomposing leaves that fall, the tree tops which have a better nitrogen ratio. Last but not least is the tree that my dogs like to really mess with all the time. Rango especially comes back here and messes about. This is a mango tree, and I need to do some more to strengthen it up because my dogs keep messing with it. I have it planted in a very protected area. So as I've been learning about trees, there's kind of 3 levels of difficulty. Level 1 would be a mulberry or a citrus here, where they're just very well adapted to our climate to begin with. Level 2 is the mango, where it really needs some protection early on in its life. It can take the sun, it can take the heat, but it has to be a mature tree. So by the time it gets over the top of this wall in height, it's going to start getting some more morning sun, and it will start attracting more of its sunlight through the day. But this giant pine tree provides natural shade for it, and so does this, and this mulberry will do the same. So it's very well protected back here, and it was started very small a year ago. Rango, get out of here. This is what I mean. He's constantly back here, constantly where he shouldn't be. Excuse me, bud. What are you doing? So that is the current tour of my budding fruit forest. Very excited to have fruit this year. When we first moved to this property, we had 6 really old orange trees, and you can still see I have one that survived, still 2 actually, that are still alive, but they are pushing 100 and they're like dying off every year, which I heard is about their length. In fact, I tried to put one in its replacement here. I was asking Tony about this. This tree's alive, but it's not doing the same thing as all my other citrus trees. Right now, all my other citrus trees are budding and creating new growth. And this one, on the other hand, is not. So yesterday when we were looking at it, we figured out that last summer it just took on way too much damage to its bark, which is one of the most sensitive areas of the tree. I didn't do anything to wrap it, which a lot of people do. They wrap their barks to protect it, because typically the leaves of a tree protect the tree's barks from sunlight. In this case, I had some shade cloth, but probably not enough. So this entire western side of the bark is burnt badly and is now dead. So half of this trunk is dead. And basically what I was told is to cut my losses, to abandon this tree, because even if I could get it to survive, it will probably only live for a few years as a result of this kind of core damage. So, you know, you win some and you lose some with gardening. I'm not a pro at gardening. I'm only a year in, so it's kind of like I was when I just started baking. Can't really learn all this stuff overnight, but for me, really like what fuels me is just being able to learn new things all the time, to challenge myself. And growing a fruit forest is where I'm at right now. It's what I'm enjoying. So we have quite a bit of work to do on our yard. You know, the bakery is taking its toll in taking time away. We have all this stuff that's like now on the side of the bakery is going to be cleaned up as the bakery moves. And so we're going to be able to invest more and more into our growing environment here. So that's all the updates that I have on this. And now it's going to be time to clean back up and go back in the bakery.